It's a great honor and sincere good fortune to have the opportunity to speak to you on this very relevant topic, the power of intention. In these days, I think almost everyone is in tension. But the only way that individually and collectively we can come out of this tension that we are in is to understand how to develop good intentions and to apply them to our lives. An intention is the purpose or the attitude that is behind our actions and our words. The history of the world very much tells us the power of individual intentions and how they have affected human civilization. William Blake, he has written, "A truth told with bad intention can beat, in other words, can be more destructive than all the lies that we can invent." It's not just what we do and what we say, but our intention that can empower us, either positively or negatively, in our own karma and how it affects people, the environment, the world. We all heard the saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because most everybody, they really feel that they have good intentions. But the nature of the ahankar, or the false ego, that is misguided, can pollute our awareness, our consciousness in such a way to justify evil in the name of goodness. One of my friends from Germany, he told me a story that was told to him by his father. It was a story about the person who Adolf Hitler appointed as the leader of the SS. He was in charge of exterminating entire races and religions of people. That was their goal. And according to history books, they successfully murdered about 6 million people, innocent civilians. One day, he was being massaged, and he was telling his masseur that he was a vegetarian. And the reason he was a vegetarian is because he very strongly believed in the principle of ahimsa. And he went on explaining the philosophical meaning of ahimsa and the glories of ahimsa. Afterward, the person massaging him asked if you really believe in ahimsa, non-violence, then why are you ordering the massacre and the murder of so many millions of people, of these minority races? And Himmler paused for some time and then spoke very gravely. He said, "It is unfortunate, but we have to do this for the good of humanity and for the future of the world." So it appears that he really believed he had good intention of serving humanity. But those intentions were clouded, polluted, and corrupted by the false ego. The terrorists today, many of them, we can assume, their intention really is to serve God and to please God through the process of murdering people that they feel are like pollution within this world. So they think their intentions are good. The way human beings think is very relative to our egoistic conceptions. Yes, the road to hell is very much paved by people who believe they have good intentions. What is very crucial to the world in the past, in the present, and in the future is for people to develop a foundation of knowledge based on universal spiritual truths and values, and to build our intentions on that foundation. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there is a beautiful invocation by Srila Rupa Goswami, where he tells that bhakti, or true love, devotion, is based on the intention of pleasing Krishna in a favorable way. Pleasing the Supreme Lord, and it should not be mixed with selfishness, karma, with desire for liberation, with desire for mystic powers. It should be simply for the pleasure of the Lord. And there's nothing that pleases the Lord more than being an instrument of His compassion for the world. Srila Prabhupada, he quotes Lord Chaitanya that bhakti is like a seed, bhakti lata bija. This seed is, according to Rupa Goswami, that intention to serve and please the Lord in a favorable way without egoism or selfishness. But along with that seed, which is so rare and so precious, there's a beautiful verse that a person or a spirit soul, through birth after birth after birth, living within this universe, comes in contact with a guru. And that guru plants the seed of devotion within the heart. That seed of our good and holy intentions needs to be cultivated and watered through satsang, association with holy people who give us proper conceptions knowledge, through sadhana, which is the water that nourishes that seed of devotion, and through seva, dynamic action based on that intention. But for all of us, along with the seed of devotion will come many weeds. Any of you who has done gardening, you know how important it is to tend to the weeds. We may have a good intention in life, but due to the conditioning of the mind, so much negativity comes. Like weeds. But what thoughts we choose to pursue is what is going to determine whether we water the weed or whether we water the real seed of bhakti or of love. Whatever good intentions we have are going to be regularly challenged and assaulted. And the tendency is to be distracted by these weeds. And once we begin this cycle of making the wrong choices, to give attention to the weeds, to the unholy or negative thoughts, desires that come to our mind, we become more and more bound and habituated to them. We often use the example that no child, by its own nature, likes to smoke cigarettes. But due to some association of people around, we think it's cool, it's fashionable, it'll make me more popular, it'll make me look sexy, it'll make me look tough, whatever. And people choose to water that weed. But as you water it, the weed becomes stronger and stronger. And the bigger the weed becomes, the more it demands water in the form of our attention and the choices we make. So every time we make a choice, we become habituated to that choice. Little children who've never smoked a cigarette, it's not a problem for them to not smoke. But someone who has watered that weed for 30 years, that habit is howling like a passionate wolf within our heart, within our senses and our mind. I need more, and more. So every time we give in to lust, or greed, envy, anger, arrogance, or illusion, those weeds become stronger, hungrier, and it's more and more difficult not to surrender to those thoughts. Krishna tells in the beginning the nature of kama, or selfish passion, or lust. Kama esha, krodha esha. Krishna says it's the most deadly enemy in all creation. It can degrade the soul. It can destroy our lives. So Krishna says from the very beginning, do not give in to this kama. Now, we've already been doing it for so many lives. So how can we go right back to the beginning? It's too late from that perspective. But what Krishna's saying from the very beginning means from today. It's not too late. But if we don't do it today, we'll probably never do it. Because our decisions have to be made now. From the very beginning, when you hear this message of Bhagavad Gita, we should curb this sinful symbol of sin, Krishna calls it. The weed within our heart. Because if we don't, it becomes stronger, hungrier, and we become more and more habituated to make choices according to the dictations of these negative, unhealthy thoughts and desires. And gradually our intentions become, right down to the roots, very, very corrupted. And we can actually even think that the weed is the seed, is the real plant that is going to make me happy in life. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wrote about Lord Chaitanya that he had come to give essentially three principles: Jnana, Vairagya, and Bhakti. Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga. Jnana means the ability to discriminate to what's actually for our well-being and what is not. What is truth? What is illusion? It's very important that we have this knowledge. Srila Prabhupada gives an example of a mother who loved her child, but her love was not based on what's really for the welfare of her child. So the little boy got typhoid fever. And this particular type of typhoid, if he ate anything heavy, he could get really sick and die. I remember I had that same type of typhoid in 1971. And I was put in a charitable hospital. My doctor's name was Krishna Gopal. And he told me for 2 weeks I couldn't eat anything. And all they gave me was glucose water. No medicines, just glucose water. Because I guess in a charitable hospital, glucose water is cheaper than medicine. And it's definitely cheaper than food. But interestingly, I was really hungry. I wanted to eat. And I saw other patients around me, and they were eating nicely. Because I was in a ward with about 15 other people with diseases in the same room. And they were eating. And so I sometimes asked, I'm hungry. And they said, no, you will die, only glucose water. In relation to the story, all I could say is it's lucky my mother wasn't there. Because this child who had typhoid was crying to its mother, I want parathas. And the mother said, no, doctor said you can't eat. The child said, no, I want parathas. So out of love for her child, with the intention to make him happy, she gave him parathas, and he died. So her intentions were good, but her power to discriminate was not. Because good intentions are meant for the right result. So Gyan is very important. To understand, who am I? Am I this material body? Am I the soul? The Atma. What are the needs of the Atma, the soul? What are the activities, what are the words, what are the thoughts that liberate the soul? And what are the activities, words, and thoughts that escalate the bondage and the suffering within this world? This is Gyan. To understand who I am, what real happiness is, and what is to be done and what is not to be done. Krishna tells in the Gita, when we're under the influence of the ego and illusion, then what is religion is considered to be irreligion, and what is irreligion is considered to be religion. So really, what is the intentions that we should cultivate for our true well-being? And what are the different distractions that are inevitably going to haunt us? And how to overcome them? That is Gyan. And what is Vairagya? Detachment. Rupa Goswami explains to accept what is favorable for devotional service and to reject what is unfavorable for devotional service. To not give in to the weeds of the restless thoughts of our mind that are trying to distract us and divert us from our real purpose. But even after knowing this, we need the strength to actually do it. Bhagavad Gita begins with Duryodhana and his people, the Kurus on one side, and Arjuna, Yudhishthira Maharaj on the other. Arjuna represents devotion, compassion, love. And Duryodhana represents envy, greed, arrogance, lust, anger, illusion. He embodied all of these qualities. He was willing to do anything and everything to fulfill the screaming hunger of the weeds in his heart. And he was not only habituated, but in that habituated state, he could actually justify that what he was doing was the right thing, the best thing, and it was real goodness. That is how the mind could mislead us if we allow it to. Krishna tells us in the Gita, when the mind is uncontrolled, it becomes our greatest enemy. And when the mind is controlled, it's our best friend. Like the story of the two dogs, the divine and the demoniac nature. If we feed the bad dog of our lust and greed and other things like that, they become stronger and stronger and stronger and control our life and empower us to justify anything as good intentions. So Arjuna was a devotee, and he had really good intentions. He wanted to please Krishna. He wanted to do real good for the world without selfishness or ego. But still, even Arjuna was put in a very, very confused state. He didn't know what would be done or what should not be done. Or in very simple language that Prabhupada explained in a previous analogy, he didn't know whether to give the child paradas or not. Should I fight this war or should I go away? He was Krishna's friend. He was a great learned scholar. He was the most noble soldier. But even Arjuna, by the nature of this world, was entangled in this crossroads of what is right and what is wrong. What to speak of the rest of us? If Arjuna could not figure out the right action, what is our position? Ultimately, he set the example by turning to his guru, to Krishna. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya. Krishna tells in the Gita, if you want to know the truth, you approach the guru, inquire submissively, and then render service, which means actually execute what you hear. And Arjuna understood perfectly at the end of the Bhagavad Gita what was to be done and what was not to be done. He learned how this material world is operated, the power of destructive time, the nature of karma, the nature of the mind, the nature of the soul, and ultimately how to rise above all these destructive tendencies by surrendering to the will of the Lord. And then he showed his example by putting it to practice, by fighting against the distractions to truth, to goodness, and to bhakti. Dhruva, he's one of the greatest examples of saintly people, Mahajans. He actually saw God, Narayan, face to face when he was only about 5 years old. He was a saintly king, a self-realized soul. But even Dhruva, who had the best of intentions, we read about he was fighting against the dynasty of Yakshas, one of them had killed Dhruva's brother. This world, there are 3 modes of nature: Sattvaguna, Rajaguna, Tamaguna, goodness, passion, and ignorance. And these 3 modes of nature are always working, and they can affect us. To fight, one becomes influenced by the mode of passion. And Dhruva he had all the right intentions to rule the world for the ultimate good and the pleasure of the Lord. But he got so much in the passion of fighting, he just kept fighting and fighting, destroying. And ultimately Kuvera came down and begged him, you already killed the person who did the misdeed. You're going to extinguish the whole race of his people. There's no need to do any of this anymore. You've done the job. Now please stop. Dhruva understood what he's saying is true. And he stopped. And he made friends with the Yakshas. So even great souls, by the nature of this world, sometimes we get entangled in what we're doing. And we need the association of saintly people to keep us centered and focused on the right thing. We have Bharat Maharaj as an example. He was the son of Rishabdev, who was an incarnation of Narayan. If we read the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, some of the greatest teachings ever given to this world are the lessons that Rishabdev, the avatar, gave to his sons. And the eldest of his sons, who he chose to be the next king, was Bharat. India was named after him, Bharatvarsha. In fact, the world at one time was called Bharatvarsha. He was influenced by the mode of goodness. He had the intention of serving the Lord, surrendering to the Lord, and perfecting his life in prema bhakti. He was so detached, he gave up his whole kingdom, went to the Himalayas, and performed meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he saw that little baby deer drowning in the Gandaki River. And out of influenced by the mode of goodness, he took the deer out of the water. But even goodness can be a distraction if we're not careful. He nursed the deer to health, which is all good things. But the problem is, he got so caught up in the physical care of this deer that he neglected his own spiritual practice. And ultimately, with all good intentions, he was infatuated by his affection for a deer. And he died and took his next birth as a deer. It's a good lesson. Now, if Bharat had association, like Dhruva did, someone would have said, Bharat, it's nice you've taken care of the deer, but do your sadhana, do your spiritual practice. Don't be materially attached. If he just had that association, he could have saved himself so much trouble. Even goodness could be a distraction if it takes our focus away from our true intention and purpose. But because he had the right intention, even though he was diverted and distracted and took his next birth as a deer, ultimately Krishna sees our intentions. Srila Prabhupada writes that the Lord accepts not everything that we offer, but the purpose, the intention in which it is offered. The intention is the desire, the attitude of our heart. And Krishna is within the heart, seeing our purpose, seeing our attitude, and seeing how sincere we actually are. So even though Bharat made a serious mistake, because he had the right intentions, he wasn't doing anything out of envy or greed. He wasn't selfish. He fell into a mundane form of compassion which diverted him from the whole purpose of why he went there, to attain enlightenment. So Krishna gave him, as a deer, the full awareness of his mistake. And that little deer would just quietly go wherever there were sadhus doing satsang and speaking from the scriptures and performing kirtan. And he just quietly listened and spent his whole life as a deer cultivating bhakti. And the next life became Jad Bharat. And in that life he became one of the greatest saints. He became the guru of a king. So yes, if we have the right intention, guided by gurus and sadhus and scriptures, even if we make mistakes, if they're not out of envy, even if we make mistakes, Krishna will be there to help us to rectify them, because Krishna sees our intentions. Those foundational intentions. When Srila Prabhupada explains, well, in this story, it illustrates how important it is that we recognize the power of the mind to distract us, and how important satsang or association really is to keep us on track. Again, Srila Prabhupada said, Krishna does not accept everything that's offered, but accepts the intention in which it is offered. In Lord Chaitanya's Leela, there was Damayanti. She was the sister of Raghava Pandit. And every year, they would cook hundreds of preparations for Lord Chaitanya. And they would pack them in bags. They lived in Panihati, which is on the bank of the river Ganga in Bengal. And they would have 2 or 3 people, actually a little procession, who took charge of carrying all those bags to Lord Chaitanya in Puri. It took several weeks to get there. And Lord Chaitanya, he would eat a little bit of each preparation for the whole year. So how is it that this Bengali prasad would last a whole year? And it wasn't just like what kakras, or these things that don't spoil, or chipped rice, poa. There were sabjis and chutneys and different rice preparations. And they stayed completely fresh all year round. Because the Lord, He was tasting their intention. And based on their intention to please Him, and all the love they put into that cooking, that love was a transcendental natural preservative. That even 8 months later when he ate it, it was as if it was cooked that day. And some of the preparations were very rich with ghee and with various milk products and paneer. And Lord Chaitanya, I guess in Bengal, sometimes they use mustard oils. Very heavy digestion. And she planned these bags so carefully that she knew which bag he would eat and which preparation he would take next. So she made this one preparation right after a big feast of rich foods that was specifically for digestion. And usually things that are good for digestion taste quite miserable. So it was ginger and some black pepper and all of these things like this. It was just a digestive aid food, which was meant to reduce acidity and like that. And when Lord Chaitanya was eating it, it tasted like nectar to him. Because he's not just tasting the sugar and the vegetables and the ghee, he's tasting the purpose, the love in which it's offered. And this love was so intimate and sweet that she was so concerned with his health. It was so personal. It was so motherly. That's what he tasted. And therefore it was like nectar. A graphic example is in the Leela of Sri Ram. Jatayu. He was a bird, a vulture. When he saw Sita being carried away by Ravana, and there was no one else around, it was just the three of them in a secluded forest. Jatayu could not tolerate seeing this. Sita told him, just tell Ram, as they were flying overhead with Ravana. She saw Jatayu down there, she said, you are old, don't try to fight Ravana. Just tell Ram which direction I'm going and how I have been taken. But Jatayu could not sit there and allow this injustice to happen. Even though he knew he would die, he would rather die doing the right thing than live and watching injustices happen. So he challenged Ravana. He attacked him. In his ripe old age, they fought and fought for hours. And ultimately Ravana, with his sword, cut off Jatayu's wings, cut off his legs. He was defeated. He was laying there. And when Ram eventually came hours later looking for Sita, he saw Jatayu a bloody mess on the verge of death.